Wrap up this chapter by discussing how water gets contaminated and how acid rain forms and contaminates our environment. This is a really complex issue, and there's different sources that cause water to be contaminated. So we're going to just briefly list them here. One of the major sources of water contamination is factories and industries like manufacturing, all different types of plants. Mining uses a lot of chemicals that, when leaches out to the water supply, can contaminate those water. Chemical production, because they might dispose of the waste incorrectly or improperly. There might be leaks, accidents, and so on. Agriculture is a big source of contamination as well, because people use fertilizers, pesticides, animal waste, all of which can flow into the supply of water carried by rainfall or other irrigation systems into rivers, lakes, and groundwater, which again causes contamination for the organisms that live in those ecosystems. Aging infrastructure of water supply systems, right? So in Los Angeles, for example, there's a lot of these pipes that break in the past several years because they're old water pipes. That could lead to additional contaminations because the water is now exposed. Sometimes the pipes themselves are made of metals that nowadays we wouldn't use anymore, for example, lead metals. And we learned before in a prior chapter about air pollutants, where lead is also dangerous there. So both in water and in air, we have to pay attention to the quantity of lead that exists. Another part is where we have acid rain, and acid rain is just the type of rain where you have air pollutants like sulfur dioxide, nitrogen oxides, various NOx's, that comes from human activities. For example, combustion, running your car produces these gases, stoves, all of these things produce some type of sulfur dioxide and nitrogen oxides. And when these gases fly into the upper atmosphere and combine with water in those clouds, they form acids. It could be either sulfuric acid, H2SO4, or nitric acid, HNO3. Now, these acidic compounds then can fall back down to the Earth's surface in the form of rain, right? And this is what we call acid rain. Because it's acidic, the pH is lower, and that increases the acidity of the rivers where this rain falls to, ocean, other bodies of water. This acidic water is not as healthy for the organisms that live in those bodies of water, but it could also have other effects. Acids, we know, dissolve metals. It ends up dissolving some toxic metals like mercury, lead, silver from soils and rocks. They could have really bad consequences for both the aquatic ecosystems like your fish and plants that exist in those ecosystems, as well as humans, because it gets into our water supply. Another contaminant that you might not think about is carbon dioxide itself. As we talked about in the chapter on climate change, the amount of CO2 on Earth has increased considerably in the past 20 years. CO2 actually dissolves in water. It doesn't dissolve by a whole lot, but some quantity of it does dissolve, and it forms carbonic acid, so yet another type of acid. So if you have a lot of CO2 in the atmosphere, just the same way as you have these other gases earlier, it could dissolve in the water in the clouds, and then they can fall back down and causes the ocean to be acidified. This becomes a problem because the acidic oceans will not be friendly for sea life, like coral reefs, shellfish, and so on. And a lot of these things are actually dying right now. You can see it in parts of the Great Barrier Reef in Australia, where these marine organisms rely on calcium carbonate for their shells and structures, but calcium carbonate react quite strongly with carbonic acid. So if both of them exist, then the calcium carbonate will no longer be as reliable, and as a result, these marine organisms would not exist anymore. So this is just a picture that shows how different types of contaminants can enter the water supply. In your weekly writing assignment, you're going to be watching a few videos on water supply and water contaminants, and basically have to think through what you learn about water in this chapter to be able to use it more effectively to reduce these various contamination that could occur in the future.